Podcast. Eddie Lacy, Mike Daniels, Gilbert Brown, Don Barclay, Micah Hyde, your Green Bay Packers, yesterday's legends and today's superstars. From corporate or non-profit events to private parties, add some spice, hire a Packers player from Mayfield Sports Marketing. For details, just go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances.
Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Cards.
If the Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Pulse of the Pack. Jason, this is the first time we've gotten to do a show like this in about 5 weeks. The Green Bay Packers, after all the doom and gloom, after all the nonsense and the crap, for lack of a better term, even notably from this show, after losing to the Detroit Lions, the Packers went into Minnesota today and laid a good old-fashioned ass-kicking on the Minnesota Vikings. It does my heart good to see the Vikings lose. I've made it very clear over the years that they are the team that I have the most disdain for. But before we get into that, I'd like to welcome you guys in. I am Jacob Westendorf, your host, as always. In a snow-ridden Midwest, we got about 7 inches of snow before the weekend hit, which has been great. And I'm, of course, joking when I say that. But with me, as always, in what I'm assuming has about 7 inches less of snow, is Jason Perrone. Jason, how's Arizona, and how are you feeling after a big win today?
Well, Arizona's fine. That's actually, the snow and the cold is actually kind of late November, December football weather. So I kind of missed that. And I know it sounds crazy, but you always want what you don't have. And I have to say, I got to give some props to you, Jacob, because much like how we saw the Packers' improvisational offense return somewhat to form today, you did a great job on the fly there, dialing in just in time to catch the intro. As a matter of fact, I think I might have hacked through a bit of the intro there at the very beginning. So I apologize to our fantastic listeners. We have a great show lined up, and I will more than atone for that mistake. Couldn't be more happy that the Packers got a big W today. It was a great thing. Just finished up writing the Game Balls and Lame Calls piece for Cheesehead TV. It was nice to actually write a normal column and not just give everybody a lame call and hit publish. So I'm doing great. I'm excited.
Absolutely. And speaking of atoning for mistakes, I don't think anybody would argue that losing to the Detroit Lions at home is a mistake. And the Packers atoned for that today. Again, a huge win on the road, something this team hasn't done a whole lot of, even with their extended greatness, which is what I'm going to call it over the last few years under Mike McCarthy and since they won the Super Bowl, is win big games that they need on the road. And the Packers did just that today. They lost last week, obviously, 18-16. Mason Crosby missed a field goal, 51-yarder, 52-yarder that would have won the game in an ugly way, but they still would have gotten a win and probably felt a lot better. There was a lot of noise this week. There were some columns written questioning, what was wrong with the Packers, why is this going wrong, and some people were pointing to personal lives, calling parents. We're not going to address that stuff. I will say, if you're in the group that likes to blame Olivia Munn for why the Packers are struggling, stop, because that's ridiculous. But we're going to move on because obviously this was a very good win for the Packers today, and I want to start the show wrong by apologizing to you guys because, Jason, you predicted 40-0 and stated really, you kind of said that tongue-in-cheek, the score doesn't matter is what you said, and I picked the Vikings 31-17 and even opined to some people that I know and said that I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings were winning this game 31-3, 31-10, and the Packers scored some garbage points because that's what they've been doing. So I will start the show by apologizing and saying we were both wrong, and I am stupid. Jason, do you have anything to add as far as an apology goes?
Well, nobody's dumber than I am. I said 40-0. That wasn't actually what I thought the score was going to be. That was just kind of more of my way of trying to kick this team in the butt and saying, listen, until you win a game, until you show me that you can hang in there and fight and actually give yourself a chance to win, regardless of the circumstances, this being a tough road game or whatever, then I'm not going to pick them. Respect is earned, and I respect this team, of course. They have a very storied history. I love them. They're my team, and I stand by them, of course, in my heart. But my head was saying, listen, there's issues this team's got to fix, and if they're not going to fix them, there's going to be a lot of people questioning whether or not they're going to be able to do some of the special things we hope that they'd be able to do. So I'm eating crow right now, and crow always tastes so good in this situation.
Absolutely does. And speaking of crow, a lot of people were starting to question Eddie Lacy. Is he overweight? Is he injured? What's wrong with Eddie Lacy in general was kind of the theme of maybe the last month and a half or so. He's back, according to Mike McCarthy. Eddie Lacy, 100 yards on 22 carries. He didn't start the game. That was James Starks. But it was very nice to see some balance from the Packers offense in general. Passing offense still struggled a little bit. Aaron Rodgers had more incompletions than completions. But you got to feel encouraged about Eddie Lacy. We haven't seen that guy. I noticed in the first quarter, I turned to the people I was watching the game with, and I said, that guy's running with more juice than he's run with in quite some time. I mean, he actually looked like he was inspired, passionate, happy to be on the field, something we haven't seen in quite some time. Jason, are you encouraged by Eddie Lacy, or do you want to see a little bit more before you say Eddie's back? Jason, did we lose you there? Okay, well, it appears that Jason is gone or speaking through mute. I'm not quite sure at the moment. But
I totally was. I was totally muted. I'm so sorry. Totally my fault. My fault. I apologize.
See, I mean, even we have issues at times. But go ahead and start your thought over. Is Eddie back, or do you need to
Well, it's funny because I started out by saying, hey, listen, let's make sure that we refer to Eddie Lacy by his proper moniker, which is Fat Eddie. And by fat today, I mean P-H-A-T. But the irony is that my cheek is so fat that I pushed the mute button with it, and so you couldn't hear me. But, he ran well today, had 100 yards on the dot. He didn't start, and you know what? I was okay with them running with Starks, and I actually think Starks should start Thursday night against the Bears as well. I think Lacy ran very well, and he definitely earned more carries, but I don't necessarily know that he gets his starting spot back. I think maybe he plays another solid game against the Bears, has a couple of nice runs, and then maybe we can talk about who's going to be out there to start the game, because in the Packers offense, it is kind of a big deal if you're a starter, and apparently also on the defensive side of the ball, which we're going to talk about as well. But, you're right, Jacob. He ran with a purpose. He seemed to care what he was doing out there. There were some questions about how much he really cares about football. He doesn't watch football when he's not playing. He's known to be a gamer and playing on his Xbox and all that kind of stuff. And so, and the weight questions, of course, is, questions about his conditioning and whether or not that's has hampered his ability to recover from that ankle injury. Now, I will say this, and you probably saw it too, Jacob, was he needed to come out probably a carry or two sooner, because that ankle was bothering him, and they had gotten the mileage that they were going to get out of him today. I think they needed to probably bring him out. Don't expose him to more pounding, because at that point the Vikings still kind of had a chance, and they're going to be coming after the ball and doing what they got to do to get the ball carrier down, and that's kind of when guys can sometimes tend to suffer some unfortunate injuries. Every injury is unfortunate, but in that scenario, that was the only complaint that I had. I won't say Eddie's back because it's only one game, but I definitely think he took a huge step in the right direction.
Absolutely did. Some of his running, some big plays in the return game. Jeff Janis had a huge kickoff return after Micah Hyde exited. that was big. You could see some of his ability in the open field on those kick returns. He got open on some deep balls, drew a pass interference penalty. All that, and you have a 20-13 Packers lead going into the fourth quarter. On the first play of the fourth quarter, I thought it was 2011 again. 3rd and 7, Rodgers takes the snap, escapes the rush, rolls right, throws a dart, and as has become tradition on the show, Jason, all James Jones does
is catch touchdowns.
That's all he does is catch touchdowns, guys. 6 catches, 105 yards, and a touchdown for James Jones today. Beautiful throw, awesome catch. Just a great play all around. I mean, it was one of those plays where I was just like, oh, my gosh, like that's one of the best throws I've ever seen, and I haven't had those in a while with Aaron Rodgers or this offense in general. Outside of Jones, though, there were still some issues. Devontae Adams, not a whole lot of production, not as many targets. Randall Cobb continues to struggle with drops. And overall just not making a lot of plays, not being on the same page as Aaron Rodgers. Jason, this is a $10 million a year wide receiver. What's our concern level with Randall Cobb at this point?
Well, it is concerning because Cobb's the guy that's kind of, this team has needed to step up and get more production from with the loss of Jordy Nelson and with Ty Montgomery being down and Devontae Adams being out and James Jones not catching passes. It's like, Richard Rodgers can't catch anything beyond 5 yards or run for more than 5 yards. So who else are the Packers going to turn to? Well, it's got to be Randall Cobb. Now, I understand that you can't outrun quadruple coverage when defenses are rolling all of their coverage to you because you're the most legitimate threat on the field. But the ball is hitting Cobb in the hands. Those are balls he's got to catch. And he's had drops in at least 2, if not 3 straight games. That's really disappointing, and it's not something that can continue. Now, I will say, very, very minor silver lining. He did catch the touchdown, in the end zone. He got himself open, which was nice. He was wide open. It was one of those plays that we haven't seen in a while that we're used to seeing, that we've been spoiled by. Aaron Rodgers has a clean shot in the end zone. Nobody's around the receiver, and usually was Jordy Nelson last season or James Jones this year. Great to see Cobb get a touchdown catch. And if you watch the post-game interview with Aaron Andrews, Aaron Rodgers is speaking, and Cobb kind of walks up behind him and makes a funny face at the camera. At least he's keeping it light despite the terrible day that he had with a couple drops that, could have been costly in a tighter game. But those are mental lapses. We've talked about mental lapses on this offense for a month now. I'm getting so tired of it. And to see the offense take a huge step forward and this team take a huge step forward and compete the way that they did, to see one of their bigger contributors, a guy that we really look to and count on, kind of fumble on a couple of occasions. I shouldn't use the term fumble because he didn't literally fumble the ball, but, kind of bumble his way through and make a couple of mental mistakes like that is not something that we want to see moving forward as the passing game gets tighter in the colder weather. They start seeing better teams in the postseason. If I dare talk about the postseason at this point, it's hopefully this is the last week and Cobb just goes off and lights up the stat sheet and the scoreboard on Thursday against the Bears.
Absolutely, and as much as this game was about the offense taking a step, they did score 30 points. Mason Crosby made 5 field goals. That was nice to see after last week's shank job. This game was about defense. I just wrote a story. It was about how the Packers basically took the Vikings game and played it much better than they did. Adrian Peterson only had 45 yards rushing. That was terrifying, thinking of Adrian Peterson running against that defense. Teddy Bridgewater threw for 300 yards, but the Packers were in his face all day long. 6 sacks. Pass rush is back. After a 3-game absence, pass rush is back. Hopefully they don't have to go through another drought like that, but it was nice to see that back. Dayton Jones was probably the best player on the field on defense. He had a big pass knockdown, 2 sacks, played inside as a nickel rusher, played outside linebacker. Mike Daniels played well. Mike Daniels had a play where he sacked Bridgewater with one arm, was being held by the right guard, and just walked him back into the quarterback. It was incredible to watch Mike Daniels make that sort of play. Clay Matthews was all over the field, didn't really show up on the stat sheet, but he was harassing Bridgewater. The Packers were able to get the Vikings in non-manageable situations and really unleash him as a pass rusher, which is something they haven't been able to do in recent weeks. That helped the pass rush. Julius Peppers got home again. We had a Julius Peppers sighting today. He kind of had his little drought during that time the Packers did, and They had their drought. Now it's over, or at least it was over for the day at least. Teddy Bridgewater never looks comfortable. Biggest play of the game, defensively at least, Morgan Burnett and HaHa Clinton-Dix. The Packers are up 27-13 at the time. The Vikings are moving down the field, wasting no time. And here I am going, oh, my goodness, we're not going to make a stop. We're going to let the Vikings walk down the field, and we're going to have to score again on offense. That didn't happen. Peterson escaped into the secondary. I held my breath. HaHa Clinton-Dix helped him. The ball got a little loose. Morgan Burnett got a hit on Peterson's arm. The ball was fumbled. The Packers recovered. It was my Mark Mayfield sports play of the game. That'll be my play of the game. It kept the 27-13 lead. Yeah, the Packers didn't do anything with it offensively, but the Vikings were in prime scoring range when that happened. They didn't score, and they got nothing out of it. They had to turn the ball over, and they had to play defense, and if nothing else, some time came off the clock. So, Jason, in general, what was most encouraging on the defensive side of things, or what are some things that caught your eye?
Well, I'm very proud to say most everything was encouraging on the defensive side of the ball today. I mean, from Dom Capers and the game that he planned and called and dialed up to the execution that I saw on that field, I thought this was probably, maybe recency is having a huge effect on me right now. But I think this was probably their best defensive game of the season. And it couldn't have come at a better time. They really needed it. They got pressure from the defensive line. They were in Bridgewater's face all day. They were supposed to beat this Minnesota offensive line that's not really statistically or in reality very good. And, the Packers faced a lesser offensive line in that of the Chargers, and the Broncos don't really necessarily have a great offensive line either, but they weren't able to really do much with that. Today, they did. They finally won a matchup they were supposed to dominate. And it was, anytime that you see your defensive linemen, the bigs, coming up and making those kind of plays against a mobile quarterback like that, it is very encouraging. Dayton Jones he needs to be on the field as often as the Packers can afford to put him out there, because he just makes one or two plays a game that are so fantastic. And more often than not, it's in the backfield and there's a quarterback involved. You do the math. That's the kind of season Dayton is having. And at this point, Jacob, I'm not even, the term quietly is not even appropriate anymore. I think Dayton Jones is on the map. He's on the radar now. He's one of the defensive linemen that, along with Mike Daniels, it's a duo now. It's not just Daniels and everybody else. So Mike Daniels, huge game from him. That sack was incredible. I mean, he's got a huge offensive lineman wrapped around him, and he one-hands it and brings Bridgewater down. Got in the backfield, made a big tackle on Adrian Peterson, and welcomed Peterson back after missing all of last season in his own special way. I loved it. Not going to be pushed around, not going to be bullied. Doesn't care if it's Adrian Peterson. He's Mike Daniels, and that's his territory. And if Adrian Peterson or whoever it is going to come into that area, they're going to pay a price. Matthews had a great game. The secondary was good again. Demarius Randall had kind of another typical game for himself. He had a couple of plays where he got beat, made a couple of pass breakups. Quarterbacks keep trying to test him deep. He still defends that deep ball pretty well. He was deep on Kyle Rudolph and was able to get his hands on it and kind of knock it away. Thought an attempt that I think Bridgewater kind of underthrew a little bit, kind of put a little bit too much air underneath it. Those are the kinds of plays that quarterbacks are going to start paying for if they're going to test Demarius Randall that way. I mean, he always seems to be where he needs to be, playing well. We talked about HaHa Clinton-Dix. HaHa got his first sack of his career, and I've been calling for this all season long because this is something that used to be a hallmark of the Packers. Like, do you remember back in, you probably don't as much because, you were much younger then, but the 96 team, one of the hallmarks of that defense was Leroy Butler and Eugene Robinson. They would rush the quarterback. They would get home, and they were getting their sacks from the secondary. And, you saw HaHa Clinton-Dix get home today. That was a great sign, because if they can bring pressure from areas like that and maintain their coverage, offenses are going to have one more thing to kind of have to look for. So the only complaint that I had was why Nate Palmer is still starting and still playing an inside linebacker after what we saw, the little glimpse that we saw of Jake Ryan against the Carolina Panthers. I just think Ryan offers more, and he did enough to me to warrant more time on the field on defense. I don't understand why the Packers are sticking with Palmer. I know that they've been, the word stubborn has been used several times this week when talking about the team's inability to make adjustments, make changes, do things they need to do to try to spur change and improve. That was about the only complaint that I had today. Defensively, couldn't have asked for a much better day.
Absolutely could not have. The Packers this year, for the most part, whenever they've needed a big day from a unit, more often than not, it's been the defense that has delivered. That'll bring us to our two segments that we're going to do post every game now. One of them's new, so that's good news for you guys. Mayfield Sports Play of the Game. I had the Ha-Ha Clinton Dix Morgan Burnett fumble. Jason, what was yours?
So the Packers were driving in the second half and needed one more score to really kind of stamp the victory and make life really, really difficult for the Minnesota Vikings. They're driving down the field. James Jones had a big third down drop earlier in the game. Rodgers throws a deep ball at him. He's got to step on the defender. Jones bobbles it a little bit, but ultimately ends up coming up with a big grab. That one went for 37 yards. It was the longest pass play of the game. Rodgers giving his receivers a chance to make a play, which is not something we've seen him do over the last couple weeks. And then 3 short plays later, Rodgers scrambles out of the pocket, coming towards the sideline, makes one of his vintage sideline throws that we've seen Jordy Nelson catch so many times on the sideline in the end zone, and there's number 89. James Jones, with all he does is catch touchdowns, and his cool new fully sleeved hoodie, gets the sleeveless turtleneck, gets both feet in bounds, makes a beautiful catch, holds onto the ball, and that ended up, not at the time we didn't know it, but that ended up being the dagger, and the Packers ended up getting a win. It was a vintage James Jones catch where he might have bobbled and dropped an easy one, but he made a crazy, ridiculous catch on an even nicer throw by Rodgers.
Absolutely. I thought it was kind of funny how much publicity the James Jones hoodie thing got, but hey, whatever gets people's attention these days. The new one we have is the Waukesha Sports Game Ball. It's a preview of Jason's column tomorrow that you'll read. Game balls, lame calls. We're going to pick one guy, give him the game ball. So if you had to pick one guy only to give your game ball to, and Jason, I know that's not how your column works, but that's how this segment's going to work because I said so. I'm joking for the most part when I say that. But one guy to pick a game ball to, I got to go with Dayton Jones. They gave him a new position this week, new responsibilities. He played some outside linebacker as a rookie, but that was mostly out of necessity. It was in a playoff game against the 49ers, and they just kind of said, we're out of guys, so here you go, kid. They threw Jones out there. They threw him out there today. He was very productive, 2 sacks, pass batted. It just felt like he was disrupted throughout the game. I can't think of another person to give the game ball to. Jason, you got anybody else? Or are we going with Dayton?
I'm going to go with Mike Daniels. Mike Daniels was my first game ball in my column, and, part of the reason why is because so many times this season he's almost cracked that list. He's just missed barely on a couple of occasions, but, again, had a couple of really big plays today, bringing the nasty. I'm going with Mike Daniels as my one big game ball of the day.
Mike Daniels, Dayton Jones. So 2 defensive linemen / 1 defensive lineman, 1 outside linebacker, whatever way you want to put it. That leads us to the next game. It's a quick turnaround. The Green Bay Packers play the Chicago Bears on Thanksgiving. Thursday night, 7:30, and I'm not sure if you've heard, but there's an old quarterback that's going to be in attendance, actually 2 old quarterbacks, but the night will be largely focused on one of them. Bart Starr, good to hear his health is going well. He will be at the game, barring a last-second change, but it sounds like Bart Starr is going to be able to come, which is important. I've always dreamed, I've told you that before, Favre, Starr, Rodgers in the same building. Now it has a chance to happen. But the other one's Brett Favre. Brett Favre is coming back. He's going to have his jersey number retired at halftime. I was at the Ron Wolf ceremony a couple of weeks ago last week when they played the Lions. And that was a very nice thing. I can only imagine how much better this is going to be. The atmosphere should be fantastic. So we're going to have a number 4 theme here for the rest of the way with 4 things. So what are your 4 favorite Brett Favre memories? And I'll start with mine. Number 4, I think it was just vintage Favre. The Packers are playing the Seahawks in the playoffs. It's a snow globe at this point. Ryan Grant fumbled twice early in the game, gave the Seahawks 14 free points. The Packers made a comeback, and it's a 3rd down, and Favre spins out of the sack. He's tumbling. He can't really see what's in front of him. He just pokes his eyes up a little bit. He underhand shovels the ball to Donald Lee, and Lee gets a first down. I just think that's, improvisation, kind of schoolyard stuff. Favre was the best at that, and that play, I think, kind of highlights his career, some of the stuff he was able to do. Number 3, Packers are playing the Broncos on a Monday Night Football game. It was after he's gotten questions about some of whether or not he's able to still throw the deep ball at his advanced age. Obviously, the Packers were good that season, surprisingly good. They ended up losing in the NFC Championship game that year, and that wasn't expected by anybody that was an NFL prognosticator or even myself. But the Packers are in overtime, and they're playing the Denver Broncos. Favre runs a play-action pass to Ryan Grant. Right after I say, literally before the play starts, I say, okay, start out small, don't do anything crazy here. Instead, Favre play fakes to Grant, rolls right, chucks one up, Greg Jennings runs under it, scores a touchdown, wins the game on the first play of overtime. Number 2, maybe the most iconic image of Favre in his playing career, and that was he throws a touchdown pass to Andre Rison in the Super Bowl. He takes his helmet off, he runs around the field. That's one of the first Packers memories that I have. I enjoy watching it anytime I can because I can remember being 5 years old and watching that happen and thinking that guy isn't that different from me, because I would probably do the same thing if I were in that scenario. Number 1, I don't know how you can put anything else at number 1, but everybody's lost a family member at some point or another. This guy had to play on national television after his father died. The Packers were in a playoff chase. They had to beat the Oakland Raiders, and beat the Oakland Raiders was an understatement. Brett Favre ripped them apart. He threw some of the best passes I've seen in his career. The pass to Wesley Walls, maybe the best pass of his career for the first touchdown of the game. Javon Walker made big plays. Robert Ferguson, which is kind of a bad name in Packers history, he made some big plays. Donald Driver. Favre was just phenomenal in every way, shape, or form, playing with a broken thumb and a broken heart. So, number 1, Oakland Raiders, Favre honors his father. I think, Jason, you can appreciate that, especially with the situation you're in now as well. But 4 favorite Favre memories for you are what?
Well, most of mine are going to coincide with yours. So instead of repeating them, I'll just pick a couple of others that stand out from Favre's career that are maybe a little bit under the radar. One I'd have to say is the Packers finally got back into the postseason conversation, and they started making the playoffs. And one of the first years that they made, as a matter of fact, the first year that they got back under Mike Holmgren was in 1993, and they happened to be in Detroit playing the Detroit Lions, and everybody remembers the footage of Favre rolling out to his left and chucking it across the field, downfield to his right, which was something Favre loved to do, throwing across his body, to Sterling Sharp in the end zone to win that playoff game against the Detroit Lions. That was kind of the first playoff victory that Favre and Holmgren had together, and obviously it propelled this franchise to greatness with the two of them being together. So there's one moment right there. I have to remember the Favre run against the Vikings, or not the Vikings, the Falcons. I think it was one of the last games at County Stadium, and it also helped the Packers either secure a playoff berth or win the division, and I think that was in 1994 maybe. That was kind of an earlier play by Favre, but that was him running in and getting into the end zone and getting a big win for the Packers there. And, the Super Bowl touchdown and him running around the field, everybody, loves that video. The Oakland game, of course, was an incredible performance for the ages. It's one that will always go down in history as one of the more special, games. There's so many deep balls that Favre threw up that ended up getting caught throughout his career. But those are a couple plays that I remember from 12. There was the game winner in 1999. It wasn't a great season for the Packers, but they opened the season in Lambeau Field against the Oakland Raiders, and he threw a last-minute second touchdown pass to Jeff Thomason to get a big comeback victory. It was so emotional and so drained that he couldn't even finish his post-game press conference. So, there's several others if I had enough time to really sit here and think about it that would come to mind. I think the biggest thing is, and the nice thing is that this franchise and Favre are at least on good terms again, to the point where we can celebrate what he did for them, because it had been a long time. It had been 2 decades of mediocre football and sometimes very poor football and bad coaching, and God love the Packers for trying to give Bart Starr a chance to coach this team, but just wasn't as successful as a coach as he was as a player. And so as a result, they didn't do well, and Favre was obviously a big reason why they were able to get back into contention. So, another thing that I loved about Favre, Jacob, I don't know if you remember this, is, whenever Ahman Green would cut back and Favre would actually not only, throw a block, but he was, good at throwing those crackback blocks, or not crackback, but, taking out a defender, and he was actually pretty good at it. I mean, that was vintage Favre there. He just loved the game so much, and that energy and that passion. And I think, not to be a wet blanket here and dig up old wounds, because the Packers finally got past the hump of winning a game today. But I think part of the reason why fans are so frustrated is because they have not seen that from anybody on this team, especially Aaron Rodgers, over the last 3 weeks, when they were so used to seeing, Rodgers get pumped up, and especially Favre. We were spoiled for years to see these energetic and very zealous, quarterbacks. That's probably one of the reasons why it seemed like it was missing, because we've just had that for so long. This franchise has definitely been very blessed at the quarterback position, and I'll be looking forward to celebrating that on Thursday.
Absolutely looking forward to celebrating that on Thursday. But there is a game to be played as well. The Packers are 7-3, and while today's win feels nice, if they turn around and lose on Thursday, then it really goes all for naught, because they just hand everything right back to Minnesota, assuming they're able to win on Sunday. So what are your, to stick with our number four theme, is 4 keys to the game. Mine, continue to run the ball. Eddie Lacy, James Starks, they should be able to do some good things against that defense. The Broncos ran for 170 yards today against the Chicago Bears. The Broncos running game hasn't been that great this season, so it's not a whole lot to write home about. The Packers should be able to do it. Another one I talked about earlier, get Randall Cobb going, whether he's got to get on the same page as Rodgers or something as simple as just him starting to catch the ball. But I do think you see some things early in the game that they do for James Jones, Devontae Adams, that little smoke screen thing. Maybe getting Cobb the ball in his hands early in the game would be helpful to him to kind of get in the rhythm of the game. I don't remember when his first target was, but it wasn't early in the game. I do know that, unless I'm completely misremembering the game, which is entirely possible. But they need to get Cobb going. Number 3 and 4 kind of coincide with each other. This is Jay Cutler's own personal version of hell. He's never played well at Lambeau Field. Lambeau Field in prime time has not been kind to him either. There's 2 games where he has 4 interceptions. Another one has been 2. He's had some really poor outings in Green Bay. This is a different year, different coordinator. Supposedly he's made some improvements. I've seen some of those improvements because I do get to watch the Bears quite a bit being out here. But they need to get to him and put him on his back, because that's when he tends to pout and start going into F it, I'm throwing it through this guy kind of mode. And that should lead to some turnovers. I want to see Demarius Randall get his hands on a ball, Sam Shields, Morgan Burnett, whoever it is. The Packers need to start getting some turnovers as well, and I think this is the guy that can help them do it. So those are my 4 keys to the game. Jason, what are your 4?
I mean, as far as having 4 keys to the game, I would just say, like you said, I want to see the defense maintain this energy level, because Jay Cutler is not making the mistakes that he's made in the past. So they're going to have to keep the pressure on him and get home, bring him down. Cutler is sneaky, kind of mobile, just like, some of the other quarterbacks that the Packers have faced. So it's not like, he's going to be a statue in the pocket. He can still move around a little bit, and he's a big guy. So they got to get home. They got to take him down. They got to keep the pressure on there. I do think the Packers need to force some turnovers. They got one today against Adrian Peterson. It was a great defensive play. Sam Shields, kind of an unsung hero today, tackled well, got on the ball, did his usual bit at corner as well. But I think they're going to have to force some turnovers, and they can't have the drops. They can't have the mistakes that they've been making the last month. They got to cut those out. Those can't happen. I don't think that if they make a few, they won't be able to overcome it. They'll be fine. And then the offensive line. The offensive line is going to have to keep Rodgers clean. He only was sacked twice today, but he was under a lot of pressure. And I know that Corey Linsley went out with the injury. I thought J.C. Treader actually stepped in and did okay in relief, and I have no problem with him starting a second game in a row and giving Linsley a week off on a short week to recover from the ankle injury, and he may need longer than that anyway, depending on the severity of it. I have not heard. But the offensive line is banged up, but these guys are gritters, and T.J. Lang had an amazing, beautiful block on the screen pass to James Starks. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it, because Lang is banged up too. He's had injuries, and he had a concussion earlier in the season, and I think, I don't remember if he's a shoulder or an ankle, because it seems like everybody has been an ankle. But the offensive line's got to step up and give Rodgers time. If they do, the Packers can really put up some serious points, and this game could be, a pretty fun one and add quite the positive spin to Packers fans' Thanksgiving nights.
Absolutely, could be. It's a shoulder injury for T.J. Lang, just to clear those things up. Last thing that we'll do, as far as the actual game goes, 4 guys that not a lot of people say, because obviously Aaron Rodgers needs to play well, Clay Matthews needs to play well, guys like that. 4 guys that maybe a lot of people won't talk about that need to play a good game. My guys, number 1 is David Bakhtiari. The left tackle has not played well in quite some time. He struggled today again, got called for a holding penalty. That seems to happen anytime Rodgers rolls his way in one of his escape plays. Seems like the rest doesn't matter, because they're just going to call Bakhtiari for holding anyway. He needs to play better. The Packers need some stability at left tackle. My guy Quentin Rollins, number 2. Micah Hyde got injured today, got taken off on a cart. That may or may not mean severity. He kind of came in with a hip injury anyways, gave up a big touchdown to Kyle Rudolph early in the game. Rollins might become the new, quote, tight end guy, which is kind of what they had Micah Hyde doing in recent memory. But Hyde hasn't done very well in that role, especially in the last couple games. Joe Thomas, coverage linebacker. He allows Clay Matthews to bump back outside and rush the passer. I'm convinced Jay Cutler has nightmares of Clay Matthews sending anything that looks like number 52 his way. I think he could get a little skittish. In order to do that, Joe Thomas needs to be able to cover, whether that's Jeremy Langford, if Matt Forte comes back, Martellus Bennett, if they find a way to dictate that sort of matchup. Thomas's role on this team is coverage linebacker. He needs to do that well. And my 4th guy is Morgan Burnett. Burnett's one of the kind of not really highly talked about players on the team, but he's a really good safety in the box. He plays well against the run. You saw the Bears' game plan the last time around. I would imagine they'll try and do some of the same things this time around as far as running the ball, keeping Aaron Rodgers off the field, those sorts of things. Get Morgan Burnett involved close to the line of scrimmage. See if he can make a play or 2 for you in the running game and put the Bears in 2nd and 3rd and along. So, Jason, you got 4 guys that not a lot of people talk about that need to have a big game.
Well, that not a lot of people talk about is tough. I have 4 guys. The first one is actually I'm going to go with Clay Matthews, because he always seems to have his best games against the Bears. It's like, this cruel joke that the universe plays on Jay Cutler. Even if he hasn't played well lately, Clay Matthews just comes up big and always ends up getting a sack on Cutler, and it's the Predator. And we all know how much Clay respects Jay Cutler. So I'm going to start with Clay, and then second one's going to be Randall Cobb. Cobb's got to step up and have himself a big day. He needs to become a bigger part of this offense. He's got to be the man. He's got to step up and really prove that he can be what we need him to be through the end of the season, because as much as he's playing loose and maybe he's not concerned about it, he needs some confidence. He's got all these targets. He's not bringing balls in. He finally got himself open today. Now he's got to haul the ball in. Davante Adams caught a slant today. I'd like to see more slants from Davante Adams. He had a couple of nice grabs. Let's elevate that game. Let's maybe see if Adams can become the sideline threat that this team has been lacking on offense. And it's time for him to kind of elevate. He's back. He's healthy. Great. Let's get him going. Davante Adams has been a piece of this offense that's been missing. Rodgers talked about him as a great player and a Pro Bowl talent. Well, let's see that actually come to life and come to fruition. And then, I could go defensive line here. I'm going to go with Ha-Ha Clinton-Dix, which is Burnett's counterpart. You mentioned Morgan Burnett. I'm going to go with Ha-Ha Clinton-Dix because, he's been leading the team in tackles and he's been making plays. He's had a couple of really rough moments, but this is one of those games where, Jay Cutler's really reeled it in this season, and he's starting to play within Adam Gase's offensive system, and he's not making the mistakes that he's been making, although he did have a couple of turnovers today against the Denver Broncos, and the Broncos have a really good defense. But I think if Ha-Ha can be his usual self and stay tight on that coverage and make sure that, Alshon Jeffrey doesn't have himself streaking down the field and they've got him covered, and Sam Shields probably equally as big with Ha-Ha Clinton-Dix here, I think the Packers are in great shape, and they probably end up getting a big win if those guys come up big and have a big day.
Okay, so there you have it. Those are our 4 guys. The final thing that we'll do, and we kind of did it a little bit earlier, but I wanted to give, because this is a big night. I mean, obviously Thanksgiving is a big holiday and all that stuff, but from a Packers standpoint, Brett Favre's coming home. So what I'm giving is, I'll give you 4 minutes. You certainly don't have to use all 4 minutes, but as whatever you want to say about number 4, and I'll start. I was 5 years old when I became a Packers fan. It was 19 years ago, and a large reason for that was because of Brett Favre. I enjoyed watching him play. I watched him play from the time I was 5 until the time I was 16 and loved anything and everything about him. I was a guy every Monday, whether they won or lost, you knew at school before we had to go to school uniforms that I was going to wear my number 4 jersey because I love that guy. He was Packers football, really, to me. I mean, when I was growing up, that's exactly what he was. I remember, in 2008, the first time I heard, and I was 16, going on 17 at the time, I heard one of the Fox trailers, and they said Rodgers and the Packers, and I double-ticked because that was just not common for me. I hadn't heard of anything other than Brett Favre being the Packers quarterback. But, Brett was in a lot of ways when I was younger the guy I looked up to. The guy when I wanted to play quarterback, I wanted to play like him. Now, when I actually did get a chance to play quarterback in a football game or two, all the coaches kind of said, you play just like Brett Favre, and that's not necessarily a good thing because he threw balls off his back foot. He threw it into double coverage. He tried to throw it through people, all those things. But I always pretended to be him. I remember I got to see him play twice, both times against Philadelphia Eagles. Once was on Monday Night Football. They lost that game 17-14 in the rain against Donovan McNabb's Eagles. Todd Pinkston, of all people, caught a touchdown to beat the Packers that night. And then the other time was the 2007 season, Favre's last year there. They won 16-13, late Mason Crosby field goal. The Packers won a game they really weren't expected to win because they weren't expected to be very good that season. The guy just embodied to me, Jason, you talked about it earlier, passion for the game, loving what you do. And I know the ending wasn't good. I know the divorce was bad, but, ever since he left, I've always said, 2 years of bad, those 2 years in Minnesota of bad, don't outweigh the 16 years of good. And really, a lot of the reason the Packers organization is as good as it is now is because of some of the stability him, Ron Wolf, Mike Holmgren, Bob Harlan, Reggie White, among others, the stability they kind of brought to the organization. And that's something I'll forever be grateful for. I'm definitely looking forward to Thursday night because I think this is something well-deserved. I've never been in the stadium for a jersey retirement. I've been in the stadium for Ring of Honors. Dave Robinson, Ron Wolf come to mind, but never for a jersey retirement. Something I'm definitely looking forward to just to feel the atmosphere in the stadium. Because when Lambeau Field has an atmosphere, and that's not always the case, but when Lambeau Field has an atmosphere that goes with it, the atmosphere I'm talking about really can't be described, but if you've been in the stadium for one of those games, you know what I'm talking about. Seattle's game from this year comes to mind. There are others I've been in the stadium for, but to be honest with you, I can't remember all of them. But there's a lot of games that just have that atmosphere, and this is going to be one of them, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. But I will stop. Jason, what are your thoughts in general on Brett Favre?
Well, this is really kind of a special part of the show because I've always kind of thought to myself and wondered, okay, if it ever came down to it, what would my 4-minute speech about Brett Favre be? If I ever had a chance to get up in front of an audience and talk about what Brett Favre meant to me, what would I say? And so obviously doing this show and on this forum gives me that opportunity, and I'm very fortunate, and I'm very appreciative of it. Because Brett Favre was a very instrumental part of shaping a lot of who I am today, and that's not hyperbole, it's true. I played 1 year of high school football, and this was shortly after Favre came to the Packers. And that 1 year of football taught me so much about life and kind of turned me into a lot of what I am today as a person overall. And it didn't have anything to do with football because I didn't play in college and I never played at the pro level. So my playing days were very, very brief and very few. However, the spirit that he had and the struggles that I watched the Packers go through for so many years with being mediocre in the 80s, and Jacob, you fortunately missed it. You weren't a part of it. I mean, for crying out loud, last week was the first time you've seen the Lions beat the Packers at Lambeau Field. I actually witnessed a couple of those before that huge, ridiculous 24-year streak started that we'll never see again. But it was the energy, it was the passion, and then the Packers finally win a championship, and I've been sticking with this team for so long, and to see them come around and get it and reach their goal was such a special moment for me. I don't know if anything will ever trump the 96 Super Bowl for me, as special as 2010 was, the way that they did it. That they were the 6th seed and they went on the road and did it that way. I don't know if anything's ever going to trump 96, and a lot of it was because of Favre. He was, battling the painkiller addiction, the alcohol abuse. We talk about Aaron Rodgers and this offense and some of the things they've been dealing with on a mental level. And, one thing you can say about Brett Favre is that no matter what was going on outside of the field, when he walked onto that field, it was all about football, and it was like nothing else mattered and nothing could rattle him. I mean, he was just that good. I remember sitting in a parking lot. One of the first jobs I ever had was as a courtesy clerk at a grocery store out in Waukesha. It was cold, and I was out collecting carts, and I ran over to my car because I had to work, and I was missing the end of the game. And for whatever reason, I don't know why I was compelled to check the radio, listen to what was going on, and I tuned in just in time to hear the Brett Favre call for the game-winning score. And this wasn't the Cincinnati Bengals game, but it was a game-winning touchdown that the Packers won in '92, and it was maybe the second time that he had done it. It was where everyone realized, like, hey, we got ourselves a quarterback. And that was a special moment because, again, all those mediocre years, watching them turn that into something magical was great. The throw, crazy throws up in the air, letting his receivers make a catch. The Oakland game that you mentioned, Jacob, which was so special. That was a big, that was a really big one. He needs to stay relevant within the Green Bay Packers organization. He needs to stay, front of mind of everybody. Even though Aaron Rodgers is doing what he's doing and it's very special, it all started with Favre because Favre was on the field. Holmgren called the plays. He set up the scheme. He gave him the opportunity, but Favre went out and executed every day. He made some of those pinpoint throws. We give Rodgers a lot of credit for his accuracy. Brett Favre threaded the needle so mmany times earlier in his career. It was unfortunate how he went out at Lambeau Field in that NFC Championship game against the Giants, and we all know about the ending that came from there. That was a tough moment, but this man deserves every accolade and every bit of credit that he is getting on Thursday night. And yeah, I'm a little bit biased because of what I watched and went through with him as he came up, but just an amazingly special player, and one that I hope is discussed all the way until my last days here on earth, because he's that special. I really do think his legend should live on that long, because we'll not likely see a player like him again. And that streak, let's not forget about the streak. And if you mentioned it, I apologize because I didn't mean to tune you out, but I've been processing a lot of things and kind of getting ready for what it was I wanted to add to the conversation. That Iron Man streak. The injuries and the way that injuries are handled in the concussion protocol today, we probably won't see that again. And I can only hope that Brett Favre is able to live a good, healthy life after some of the hits and some of the injuries that he sustained. The man was a warrior, and he gave his heart and soul to the town of Green Bay and to this Packers organization. I love him to death. I'm so thrilled that he's coming back, and welcome back number 4. I can't wait to see his name go up in that ring.
Yeah, I guess a couple things I forgot that I did want to add. I was at the Packers Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and even though the way that it kind of ended up being that wasn't the nicest thing, it was a very cool atmosphere for the fans. The emotions were incredible as he walked through the tunnel again for the first time as a Packer since 2008. It was incredible. I remember something, and I guess this was really my lasting image of him is, I remember before the Seattle Seahawks game last year in the NFC Championship game, somebody told me that they thought the Packers were going to win, and then I was like, what are you talking about? They're playing in Seattle. Literally nobody has said that to me. And he told me, well, who needs the 12th man when you've got number 12, man? And I thought that was cool. I mean, I've used it since then. But that's something that I didn't say it in those words back then, but I always thought of it. As long as, the chips may be down, we may have Antonio Chapman as our number 2 wide receiver. It might be Bill Schrader, and God bless Bill Schrader, but Antonio Chapman. But those guys weren't Jordy Nelson, for example. I always thought as long as we have number 4, we've got a shot, and it doesn't matter who that is. And that speaks to the greatness of an individual player. And the same thing can be said about Rodgers now. As long as you got 12, you got a shot. But as long as we had number 4, we had a shot. Last thing we want to do, there is a game. And, we've kind of glossed over that, I guess, because of how special everything about it is going to be. But there is a game that night, game prediction. I said I wouldn't pick the Packers again until they won. Well, they won today. The Packers are a better football team than the Bears. The Bears are improving. I know that. They're not the same team that came here last year and got beat 55-14. They're not the same team that the Packers beat in week 1. But the Packers are still better than the Bears. I think it's going to be an emotional night. I think that the defense is going to come juiced up and ready to play. And like I mentioned earlier, this is Jay Cutler's personal version of hell. I think the offense is going to make some plays. I think there's some plays to be made against that Bears defense. I think the Packers will be able to do that in the running game, in the passing game. And I'll even throw one out there. I think Jeff Janis catches a pass on the shot play. So for those of you that say, hey, Jeff Janis, there's my bold prediction for the game. I like the Pack 34-17 over Chicago on Thanksgiving with a 4 instead of the A. Jason, Bears or Pack?
Well, there's, the Packers really disappointed us with last week with the Ron Wolf, ceremony and after the Broncos honored Pat Bowlen, they showed up so big in the Sunday night game. You always kind of hope whenever your team honors somebody from the past that's deserving that they're gonna come up big on the field. And the Packers certainly did not do that. They could not have played a worse game against the worst team in the Detroit Lions. So with that being said, after today, I don't think there's any way they're going to lay an egg on Thanksgiving. It's a short week, so I'm going to go 27-17. I think the Bears score late to make it a lot closer than it really is. I just think short week, they probably don't put up quite as many points as you have them scoring, Jacob, but I don't see any way the Packers lose this game. They might not light it up, but again, it's a short week. They got some guys that are banged up, and they're going to be kind of piecing some things together, but it's the Bears, it's Jay Cutler, and Lambeau Field is his kryptonite. It's not happening. There's just no way. It's going to be the Packers' night, and with all of the mojo of Brett Favre and hopefully Bart Starr's on that field, I just don't think you got 3 legendary quarterbacks on the field. Good luck, Chicago Bears.
3 quarterbacks on the field for one franchise that are better than any quarterback that the other team has had in their franchise. I just think that's funny. But that's going to do it for today's show. Be sure to check out PackersTalk.com for all your latest Packers news and podcasts. Follow the show on Twitter at Pulse of the Pack. You can follow me at Jacob Westendorf. You can follow Jason at Jason Perrone. Thank you to our sponsors, Mark Mayfield, Waukesha Sports. We appreciate all you do. Listen in for Mayfield Play of the Week and the Waukesha Sports Game Ball segments we'll do on every given week. Packers, Bears, Thanksgiving. Hope to see you guys out there. Number 4 is coming home. We both like the Pack, and by a pretty decent margin. Thank you, as always, for listening to Pulse of the Pack.
the Pack Podcast.
Eddie Lacy, Mike Daniels, Gilbert Brown, Don Barclay, Micah Hyde, your Green Bay Packers, yesterday's legends and today's superstars. From corporate or nonprofit events to private parties, add some spice, hire a Packers player from Mayfield Sports Marketing. For details, just go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances.
Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If the Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.